I was adjusting my veil in front of the copper backsplash when I saw her in the reflection. My mother-in-law, Margaret, was standing 2 feet behind me. She didn't know I could see her. She was looking at my champagne glass sitting on the bar. I watched her pull something small from her clutch. A vial. 3 drops went into my drink. Clear liquid. No sound. I didn't turn around. I didn't say anything. I just waited until she walked away to talk to someone across the room. Then I reached forward and switched our glasses. Hers was now where mine had been. Mine was in my hand. I walked back to the head table and sat down next to my husband, David. He squeezed my hand under the table. He told me I looked beautiful. He had no idea that 10 feet away, his mother was about to drink something she'd meant for me. I'm a restoration architect. I work on old buildings, foundations, load-bearing walls, structural integrity. I've learned to stay calm when things are falling apart. Panic doesn't fix anything. What I felt in that moment wasn't fear. It was something quieter, like the feeling you get right before a beam either holds or snaps. I checked my pulse. 80 beats per minute, elevated but steady. Margaret was seated now. She was laughing with my parents, playing the role of the gracious mother-in-law. She looked at me once. Her eyes were cold. She raised the glass, my glass, in a little toast. Just to me. A small smile, like she'd already won. She thought I didn't see her. She thought I was just some girl who got lucky, someone who didn't belong in her family, someone she could erase with money or chemicals or both. I picked up my water glass. My hand didn't shake. Margaret took a sip of the champagne, then another. She looked satisfied. I set my glass down. I smiled back at her. Then I waited. To understand why I didn't stop her right then, you need to understand how we got here. This wasn't sudden. This was the end of something Margaret had been building for 2 years. I met her at the estate inspection. I was wearing work boots and a hard hat. There was drywall dust on my jacket. She looked at my hands like I was carrying something contagious. She asked David, right in front of me, if he was hiring someone for remodeling work. When he told her I was his girlfriend, she didn't smile. She just said, "Oh." The Hastings family is what people call old money, which usually just means the money is old and they're afraid of anyone who works for a living. The insults were never loud. They were small. Structural cracks. She would forget to invite me to dinners. She would introduce me to their friends as David's project manager. Not his girlfriend, not an architect, just someone who managed projects. I have a master's degree. I have a license. She knew that. 6 months ago, I was sitting in her library. She slid an envelope across the desk. Cream-colored, heavy paper. Inside was a cashier's check. $100,000. She called it a severance package. She said, "You're a lovely girl, Claire, but let's be realistic. You build things. We own things. You'll never be comfortable at this table. I'm just trying to save you the embarrassment." I looked at the check. It was more money than my parents made in 2 years. I looked at her. I didn't tear it up. I didn't throw it in her face. I just slid it back across the desk. I said, "I think you're underestimating the cost of labor, Margaret. I'm not for sale." That's when her eyes changed. That's when I stopped being a nuisance and became a threat. In psychology, there's something called an extinction burst. I learned about it when I was studying how stress affects building materials, but it applies to people too. When a child realizes screaming isn't working, they don't get quieter. They scream louder. They break things. They escalate right before they finally give up. The week before the wedding was Margaret's extinction burst. On Tuesday, she called our florist and tried to cancel the order. She told them the bride had died in a car accident. The florist called me first, thank God. On Thursday, I found her in the bridal suite. She was holding my veil. When she left, there was a tear through the lace. She said it caught on her ring. I know the tensile strength of French lace. You have to want to rip it. I fixed it with gold thread, a technique I use in restoration. I didn't tell David. If I told him, she would twist it. She would call me paranoid, stressed, imagining things. She relied on the fact that her behavior was so extreme that no rational person would believe it. So when I saw the vial at the reception, everything made sense. This wasn't just hatred. This was the final move. She couldn't stop the wedding, so she decided to ruin the memory of it. She wanted me sick, humiliated. She wanted every guest in that room to see me as weak and unworthy of the Hastings name. She wanted a disaster. I just decided to let her be the victim of it. The thing about structural failure is that it's rarely instant. Before a building collapses, it groans. The rivets pop. The wood splinters. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it. The reception hall was loud with applause. David had just finished his speech. He was charming, self-deprecating, perfect. He sat down and kissed my cheek. He whispered that he was the luckiest man alive. Then the room went quiet. Someone tapped a spoon against crystal. The sound echoed like a warning bell. Margaret stood up. She looked elegant in her silver gown. She held the champagne flute, the one with the gold rim, the one she'd poisoned, high in the air. The room waited. She smiled at the guests. Then she turned her gaze to me. It was a predator's smile. "Marriage," she began, her voice projecting across the room, "is about partnership. It's about knowing who you are and where you come from." A few people at table 4 chuckled. "And most importantly," she continued, "it's about trust, knowing that the person sitting next to you has your best interests at heart." She looked me dead in the eye when she said the word trust. I didn't blink. I raised my water glass. Margaret raised the poisoned champagne. "To the happy couple," she said. She tipped the glass back. I watched the liquid disappear. I watched her swallow. 1 gulp. 2. She drained it. For a moment, nothing happened. She sat down looking triumphant. She turned to my father and started talking about his golf game. 1 minute passed. Then 2. I sat perfectly still. My hands were folded in my lap. I was counting the seconds like a metronome. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, it started. Margaret stopped talking mid-sentence. She blinked rapidly. Her hand went to her throat. Her face, usually a mask of foundation and composure, turned gray. She tried to stand up, maybe to excuse herself, but her knees buckled. She grabbed the tablecloth to steady herself. She pulled a centerpiece of lilies down with her. Then the emetic did exactly what chemistry dictated it must do. It wasn't polite. Margaret retched, a guttural, ugly sound that cut through the string quartet. She vomited directly onto the head table, all over the silk runner, the china, the skirt of her custom-made gown. The smell hit us instantly. The woman who had spent 60 years building an image of untouchable perfection was now heaving on the floor in front of 200 of the city's elite. "Mom!" David shouted. He jumped up. "Mom!" She looked up at him. Her eyes were wide and unfocused. She was gasping for air. She slurred. "I don't feel..." She collapsed sideways into the mess she'd made. The room erupted into chaos, but I stayed seated for 1 second longer. I watched the ruin. It was ugly. It was tragic. And it was exactly what she had ordered for me. In a crisis, most people panic. As the guests screamed and crowded around, I stood up and took charge. I told the DJ to cut the music. I directed the coordinator to clear a path. David was on the floor with her, checking her vitals, his surgeon training kicking in. He was shouting commands. Pulse thready, airways clear, pupils dilated. The paramedics arrived in 4 minutes. They loaded Margaret onto the stretcher. She was barely conscious, moaning something incoherent. As they lifted her, her beaded clutch bag slid off her lap and hit the floor. The clasp snapped open. Contents spilled across the hardwood. A lipstick, a compact mirror, and a small empty glass vial. David saw it. He froze. But that wasn't the smoking gun. Next to the vial was a piece of heavy, cream-colored stationery, folded into a square. I reached down and picked it up. I knew what it was before I opened it. It was in Margaret's handwriting, elegant looping script. I walked over to David. He was staring at the vial. His face was pale. "David," I said. My voice was low, cutting through the noise. "Read this." He looked at me, confused. Then he took the paper. I watched his eyes scan the words. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must apologize for the interruption. My new daughter-in-law has struggled for years with personal demons. We hoped the stress of the wedding wouldn't trigger a relapse, but it seems the alcohol was too much. Please forgive the mess. We will get her the help she needs." It was a speech she had written before the reception. She hadn't just planned to make me sick, she had planned the narrative of my destruction. She was going to frame my poisoning as a drunken breakdown. She was going to take the microphone while I was vomiting and destroy my reputation in front of everyone. I saw the change happen in David's face. It's a rare thing to watch a man become an orphan while his mother is still alive. The concern vanished. The panic vanished. His eyes went cold. He looked at the note, then at the vial, then at the woman on the stretcher. He finally saw the architecture of the trap. He realized the monster wasn't under the bed. She was the one who had tucked him in. He folded the note and put it in his pocket. He didn't look at me. He looked at the paramedic. "She didn't have a stroke," David said. His voice sounded like grinding metal. "She ingested an emetic and a sedative. Check her bag for the vial and call the police." The paramedic paused, then nodded. David stood up. He walked past his father, who was sitting with his head in his hands. He walked to the coordinator's desk and asked for her phone. Then he called the police himself. I stayed where I was. I didn't need to do anything else. While the paramedics were loading Margaret, I had already texted the venue manager. I had restored the Hastings estate. I knew exactly where the blind spots were. And I knew exactly where the security camera behind the bar was angled. I had the footage in my inbox before the ambulance reached the hospital. Step 1, document everything. Step 2, let the evidence speak. Step 3, wait. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and bad decisions. Margaret was stabilized in a private room. The drugs flushed from her system. But the legal toxicity was just beginning. The police were waiting in the hallway. Officer Brennan was a man who looked like he'd seen enough family dramas to last 10 lifetimes. He was taking my statement. I didn't need to be emotional. I just needed to be efficient. I pulled up the file on my phone. I showed him the video. Timestamp 2:47 p.m. Margaret looks around. She pulls the vial. She drops the poison into my glass. It was high-definition proof of a felony. Officer Brennan watched it twice. Then he made a note. David walked out of Margaret's room. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. He walked past me, past his father, and went straight to the officer. "My mother is awake," David said. His voice was clinical, detached. "She wants to make a statement." "Did she confess?" Officer Brennan asked. David laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "No, she told me she did it to save me. She said Claire was a gold digger who was ruining the Hastings bloodline. She said I would thank her one day." I watched David. This was the moment. The cord was either going to snap or it was going to strangle us. Margaret had played her final card. The mother knows best defense. She was banking on 30 years of guilt and obligation to make him drop the charges. David reached into his tuxedo pocket. He pulled out the cream-colored stationery, the pre-written speech. "The evidence of premeditation," David said, handing it to the officer. "My mother didn't just try to assault my wife. She planned a character assassination. She wrote this before the reception started. This proves intent." "David, don't," his father whispered from the chair. "She's your mother." David turned to his father. "No," he said. "She's a criminal. And if you pay for her lawyer, you're an accomplice." He turned back to Officer Brennan. "I'm pressing charges, and I'm requesting an immediate restraining order for myself and my wife." I watched him sign the statement. It was the most romantic thing I'd ever seen. He didn't just choose me. He amputated the limb that was killing us. He cut her off with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. There were no tears, just the sound of a pen on paper. Finalizing the divorce between a son and his toxic origin. David's father stood up. He looked at his son for a long moment. Then he walked into Margaret's room and closed the door. We didn't see him again that night. David and I sat in the waiting area for another hour, mostly in silence. At some point, he took my hand. "I'm sorry," he said. I shook my head. "You didn't do this." "I should have seen it. She was your mother. You weren't supposed to." He looked at me. His eyes were red but dry. "Thank you," he said. I didn't ask what for. I just squeezed his hand. Officer Brennan came back an hour later. He told us Margaret was being formally charged with aggravated assault and reckless endangerment. She would be arraigned in the morning. We went home at midnight, still in our wedding clothes. David took off his jacket. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor for a long time. I sat next to him. We didn't talk. We just sat there in the dark. It's been 12 months since the wedding. Margaret is currently serving a 24-month sentence for aggravated assault and reckless endangerment. Her lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, but the pre-written note destroyed that defense. You can't claim temporary insanity when you drafted a press release about it 3 days in advance. The trial lasted 2 weeks. David testified. I testified. The video played in open court. Margaret's friends from Table 4 sat in the gallery. They didn't look at her. When the verdict was read, Margaret didn't cry. She just sat there with her hands folded, like she was at a luncheon that had gone too long. David's father paid for the lawyer anyway, but he didn't attend the trial. He sent David a letter 2 months later. It was short. He said he understood David's decision. He said he was sorry. He said he needed time. David wrote back. He said he understood too. They haven't spoken since. David and I didn't move into the estate. We bought a fixer-upper on the other side of the city. It has good bones, but it needs work. Just like us. I'm sitting at our kitchen table right now, working on a bowl I broke last week. It's a Japanese technique called kintsugi. You don't hide the cracks. You fill them with lacquer mixed with powdered gold. The philosophy is that the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. The break is where the strength is. For a long time, I thought a perfect marriage meant no conflict. I thought it meant smooth surfaces and easy days. But Margaret taught me something valuable. She tried to shatter us. She tried to find the stress points and hammer them until we crumbled. But she miscalculated the materials. When we sat in that hospital waiting room, watching the police lead her away in handcuffs, David and I didn't fall apart. We fused. The trauma didn't leave a scar. It left a seam of gold. We trust each other with a depth that most couples never reach, because they're never tested. I know with absolute certainty that he will choose me, and he knows that I will see the threats he's blind to. I finish the bowl. The gold lines catch the afternoon sun, shining brighter than the original ceramic ever did. It's imperfect. It's jagged. And it's unbreakable. David comes home around 6. He sets his bag down by the door. He sees the bowl on the table. He picks it up carefully, turns it in the light. "It's perfect," he says. I smile. "It's not, but it works." He sets it down and kisses the top of my head. We make dinner together. Pasta. Nothing fancy. We eat at the table with the windows open. The evening air smells like cut grass and something blooming I can't name. It's quiet. It's ours. Later, I get a message from my cousin. She's getting married next spring. She says her fiancé's mother has been making comments. Small things. Forgetting to include her in plans. Mispronouncing her name on purpose. She asks if we can talk sometime. I read the message twice. Then I write back, "Of course. Call me whenever you're ready." I set the phone down. David looks at me from the couch. Everything okay? Yeah, I say. Just someone who might need a little advice. He nods. He understands. I walk over and sit next to him. He puts his arm around me. We sit there in the quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like safety, like home. If you believe that toxic family members don't deserve a seat at your table, go ahead and hit that like button. And subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. Drop a comment and let me know what city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of this community. 2 more stories are coming up next that I think you'll find just as interesting. Thanks for listening.